Yeah, hi everyone. I'm just trying to summarize a long series of videos I've just completed and will have uploaded by the time this one goes up. They're all about using the Nokia Lumia 920 Windows Phone 8 camera for the last 3 months, which is how long I've had it. I had it since they very first came out, and so this is 3 months down the road. Many countries in the world are only just getting these in this past month, so a lot of people are still trying to decide whether to buy one. I'm answering that question in this video much more briefly than in the other videos because they are very, very long. They're all linked here in the description if you want to go through them. They go into a lot of detail about, a lot of aspects of the device. This particular video is just meant to summarize that and answer the question about, is it any good? Should I buy one? And so to answer that, the should I buy one question, it's really about who are you? It's where are you coming from? Because it's not just a simple yes or no question. And I've been thinking about it, and there's a couple of audiences. There's people for whom this is their first smartphone, and people for whom it is not their first smartphone, and they are in other ecosystems, Apple and Android or BlackBerry or something. And it does matter. There's a difference. If this is the easy one is if this is your first smartphone, no doubt about it. I can highly recommend Windows Phone 8, and once you've decided you're happy with Windows Phone 8, I can highly recommend the Nokias. And if you're buying a Nokia, I can of course highly recommend the 920. That said, you don't have to have the 920 to get the vast majority, like 97% of all the things I've said in the previous videos and the assessment videos. You can get nearly all of that in a cheaper Nokia Lumia. And there are other models. This is the 920. There's an 820, a 720, a 620, and a 520. There are also some models such as a 510 and a 610 and a 710 and an 800 and a 900. Those should be avoided. Those are now last year's stock. You'd buy those if it was just a cheap phone that you weren't interested in upgrading over time. But if you want the latest Windows Phone 8, it's got to be a 20 model, 520, 620, 720, 820, 920. I'd like to particularly single out the 620 because that is a device that gives you pretty much everything, as does the 720. It gives you all of this, but the price point is very, very low. The price point of the 620, I think it lists for something like a third of the price of the 920. The street prices will vary greatly, of course. The point there is that it's so much cheaper and you get nearly the same experience. You can get different colored backs for it, so you get a nice black one for work, or you get a nice lime green one, which looks really interesting for the weekend. And it has all the main features. It has a front-facing camera. It's got the NFC system for near-field communications. You still get the Dolby, the surround sound. You get the equalizer. You get the only thing you don't get the optical stabilization in the camera. You don't get this case, you get a different case. You don't get the very high resolution super duper screen, but you get a very nice colorful eye-popping AMOLED screen, which is basically the same as was on the old Lumia 800 that I had before, and was plenty nice. That was an excellent screen. So I can recommend that highly. So the 620 has basically that experience for a fraction of the price of this. If this was your first device and you're sort of keen on this system, maybe because of Nokia Drive, the offline sat-nav or something like that, then by all means that's one to consider. The 720 that has also just come out is very similar, but it's this sort of size. It's got a big screen like this. It's not high resolution, but it's a big screen. And so if you're looking for that experience, the bigger screen, you can get the 720 as well. I don't think it's AMOLED, but I'm not sure. Both those phones, or at least the 620, they take an SD card, so they take extra memory on a slot, and that memory can be used for media libraries, music and videos and that sort of thing. And they can actually hold twice as much as this phone can. This tops out at 32 gig. If you can buy a 64 gig SD card, micro SD card, you can have double the storage on your much cheaper phone. So there's even advantages like that to having the lesser phone. So that's something to consider when you're looking at a phone like this. The price point, what do you need? Do you really need to spend this much? So that's newcomers to the system. But people coming from some of the other operating systems like iOS, that's a big one. iOS, it's an expensive system, it's an expensive phone, expensive ecosystem. It's very good. I don't think people with iPhones, especially if they bought their own iPhone and would continue to be able to afford to buy their own iPhone, I can't see any reason why they'd particularly need to swap or want to swap unless they were just absolutely sick of iOS. I don't think most people get sick of iOS because they're not really into iOS. Typical users are into the music or the apps, those sorts of things that they do on the phone. Now, if you've invested $1,000 in iOS apps, well, you're going to lose all those if you move to Windows Phone or to Android or BlackBerry. You're going to lose all that. So you might not want to do that. If you've, on the other hand, you haven't invested money in apps, but you've invested money in music on iTunes, that's fine. You can have all that on your Windows Phone, so that's not a problem. So maybe you've got an old iPhone 3 that your mom gave you, and that's worthless, and you haven't got money for an iPhone 5, and you've got a lot of iTunes music. Well, a Lumia 620 could be very exciting. Or if you want a bigger screen, the 720 could be a very exciting upgrade for that, or an alternative phone for you to look at. Yeah, I would definitely recommend it in that case. But if you've got an iPhone, you've got the money to stay in the system, stay in the system. I don't see any reason to move. People who are on Android, that's a funny situation. I think Android users sort of fall into two camps. They're the people who have Android because they know what it is. They're the enthusiasts. They're people who love to dick around with their phones. They like to play with the phone. I went over this in one of my videos. They like to play with the phone rather than use the phone. And I know that's the case because I've been there myself. I've done that myself. Windows Mobile had exactly the same thing going on. You could play with the phone, and it was fun and it was interesting, and it becomes your hobby, is playing with the phone. And all the customizations and the screens and the task managers, all that garbage becomes part of playing with the phone. But that's not using the phone. And I gave that up. I wanted to use the phone and not be messing with the phone all the time. I needed to use it, so it had to be good and clean and perfect. That's why I moved to this. That's why I wanted this. I was so happy when Microsoft did this. They solved all that problem. Android is still stuck in that situation. So I think a good chunk of Android users are that crowd. They can get a cheap Android, they can play with it, and it's sort of fun. Then there's the other chunk of Android users as well. I think they're in there by mistake. They bought it because they would like to have purchased an iPhone. They went into the shop. They couldn't afford an iPhone. So what's next to the iPhone? Like 50 Android phones at all price points. And so they pick one of those, and that's what they walk out with. I think they're the ones who are not interested in messing with the phone. Probably every time they try, they get into a mess. The menus are just full of cryptic things. They wouldn't even know what to do with them. Those people, they use the phone, they want to Facebook, they want to browse a bit, listen to music. Those people could easily move to Windows Phone and have a better experience than they're having on Android. I've no doubt about that. So yeah, the Android camp is a bit split. Some people no, some people yes. And I actually saw some stats earlier today that showed that 30% of people who are buying Windows phones are actually former Android users, whereas only something like 2% of former of new Windows Phone buyers are former iOS users, and that's very telling. That is exactly the difference between those operating systems. So, if you're on Android, yes, no. You can make your mind up about that. It's pretty clear about what the differences are in my view on that. If you run BlackBerry, typically you have BlackBerry because your work gave it to you. I don't know why people have BlackBerry when they're not at work. Probably because they had it at work and they went home and they thought, oh, well, I'll get a BlackBerry because I know how it works. Well, the BlackBerry of today, the Z10, is not the BlackBerry of the past. It's not the same phone. It's a completely different phone. And so if you are looking at buying a BlackBerry today, you're not actually buying into an ecosystem that's been around for years. You just aren't. You're buying a new phone, the new ecosystem, that is basically starting from scratch. And it's an expensive, high-end phone. It's not a cheap phone at all. It's like an iPhone. So you're jumping in. The decision is you would have to jump in at the high end of the hardware and buy into a brand new ecosystem. Now that's the equivalent. If you're prepared to do that, then you should have been prepared to buy into Windows Phone 7 2 years ago, because that's approximately where BlackBerry's at right now. That's their ecosystem right now. They've got a long way to go. I think you should look at BlackBerry in 2 years. If you want to swap to BlackBerry, look at them in 2 years and see where it is. At that point, you'll be able to tell, has it developed? Has it really, benefited from that extra time? Are the developers on board? Is the hardware on board? Is there a whole lot of new phones at different price points with some innovative hardware? All that sort of thing. That'll start to happen in the next year or two with BlackBerry. But right now, it's starting from scratch. Okay, people who have BlackBerries, should they move to this? Okay, obviously if it's their work phone and their work won't let them, no. And if it's their work phone and their work is swapping to Windows Phone, as some are, then yes. If it's your private phone and you're concerned about, you don't think the new you've got an old BlackBerry and your contract's up and you're thinking, okay, time to get something new. The new BlackBerry is too new for me, too expensive or whatever. Again, you can jump into the Windows Phone system, get a much more mature operating system, much more mature ecosystem at a much lower price point, and get some very cool apps again. The Drive and the Xbox Music. I mean, I understand on BlackBerry they're just giving you 7 digital for music. Well, that's nothing. So it's not very exciting. I would say BlackBerry people, yes, by all means, check out Windows Phone. It will be cleaner and easier to use than going to Android, so long as you're not planning to mess with the phone. If you just want to use it, by all means go for this. If you've got some real money behind you, got enough money in your pocket, maybe you'd like to go to Apple, to iOS as well. That's fine too. Either of these two are fine. They'll both give you a lot of fun. Okay, I think that about wraps it up for me. Will I buy this again? Yeah, I guess that's the last question. Will I buy it again? I will probably be buying whatever the next Lumia device is, the next high-end Lumia device. As I said earlier, I think there could be one of two devices. It could be a tank-sized powerhouse that has a pure view, fancy many megapixel camera with optical image stabilization as well, sort of combining this and the 808 into one great big tank of a device. That will be very interesting. But they can't afford to not also put out a high-end smartphone that isn't a svelte, thin metal, doesn't have to be metal, but it probably will be. But they need to put something out that is thin, because they got too many complaints from too many reviewers about the size of this. And even the other phones, the 820 and so on, they're a bit chunky. They all look a bit chunky, and they need to do something thin. Even if it's fake thin, like the HTC with the sharp edge, but it just needs to be thinner. They need to make some good phones thin. So maybe they'll do the 920 as a 940 as a flagship camera phone device, and maybe the 840 or whatever as the sort of business-like thin and light phone. That would be interesting. I would probably end up going for the powerhouse phone, the big one, because I like to have a good camera. Very keen on that. So that's what I will do. Yep, you'll see me back here in a year with whatever the new one of these is. And be prepared to sit through a few more long videos when you do. Okay, thanks for watching. Give me a like. Subscribe if you want to see more. And otherwise, have a good night. Bye-bye.